And you is easy cause your cheese is blue. Bum, bum, ba bum, 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 ba bum, bum, ba bum, 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 bum. Hello, this is another video talking about the Kings of War 3rd edition big rulebook. So it came out 20th of October, well, released 20th of October, and went to people in that week, and probably still coming out to people because a lot of people really wanted it. I don't know if it's true, but it seemed to have gotten a little bit of resurgence in Kings of War because of this edition, because it seems like, I'd say Dead Zone is the now biggest game, but I'm probably wrong on that. So yeah, so this book has, I'd imagine, been in preparation for the best part of a year, if not longer. Someone in the comments can tell me if I'm right or wrong. So it's a bit over 400 pages, and for the price I think it's pretty spot on. There's some stuff from Vanguard, from 1st edition, from 2nd edition, but there's also some new stuff in the terms of units. A lot of the background's fairly new, but there's just a bit sprinkled here and there that's from the other books and whatnot. A fair bit of the art's new. Obviously it's about half new, half not, which is understandable, but some of the new artwork is absolutely amazing. Put in the comments below if you've seen it before, but the ones I'm going to put in this video, good grief, it's really good. So you have from page 6, you know, you've got the inner cover, which is the Northern Lights versus the Night Stalkers. It's kind of a faded black and grey version of the 2-player starter box they're doing. And on the inside outer cover you've got the Elves versus Dwarves, and you'll find a full colour picture of that in the book. And then turned over it's black, so could have got some of the people to sign it on Mantic Open Day. Never mind. Never mind. So you got a faded print of the Kings of War cover, and then you've got a letter in sort of parchment sort of look that Ronnie talks about, who CEO owner of Mantic, and then you got introduction of what the game's about, what's in the book, and so forth. And then you've got the contents page, and starting on page 6 to page 63, so that is 63, that's about 59 pages worth for the rules. So that's 349 pages left. So it's about 1/6 of the book is made for the rules. The rest of it is not, which only really the more recent editions of Warhammer Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40k have really only been smaller. To an extent. And from page 74 to page 222, so probably the biggest chunk of it is about the background of each forces. Strangely enough, it's got background on the Kingdoms of Men, but no army list for the Kingdoms of Men. No idea. But I suppose you could do a Basilian army, but use them in King's War, I suppose. And then from page 230 to 388, well, it's more than that, but I'm just listing where it starts. You've got the army lists, and there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 armies, which is fairly decent. In the second edition, 1, 2, 3, 3 of those 14 lists would have been the Uncharted Empires book, and one of those lists would not even be in there. The Northern Lights is completely new. Well, new from Vanguard, but new for King's War entirely. Then it's got the credits listing all the people, which comment below if Games Workshop does this, but from what I gather they do not. If you check out Bardic Broadcasts, he did a video earlier this year about he got a special edition version of the 40k rulebook that's got some postcards and whatnot, but it doesn't say who the artists are. It does in here. Mantic, give your artists a raise. They are doing a friggin' fantastic job. Everyone else is obviously, but the artists stand out the most here as far as I'm concerned. Rules then. The rules are fairly straightforward. Getting started, units on page 10 and 11, basically what models should be based on what base sizes, 20mm, 25mm, 40mm, 50mm, so on and so forth. And then you've got unit footprints, which is if you're putting them on trays, how big should the models be, how long by how deep, and how big should the tray be, how big should the tray be. If you know people who sell movement trays, then this is a big help. LCA do movement trays. If you know them and you've got the King's War book, either digital or from the 2-player starter set or this book, then you'll be able to order them very easily. It does unit basing examples because you don't have to have the full 20 models on a unit of 20. You can have 15 because it's 75% of the unit. Then it goes on to unit characteristics, then the turn order, movement, including charging, because charging is on the movement phase. You've then got terrain, which makes a lot of sense having it after the movement, the initial movement. Most books have it after the turn and pretty much everything, but having it after the movement means that you understand how it's going to hinder you or help you more. Then you've got the range phase, they call it, or the shooting phase. And then you've got the melee phase. The thing about the one slight criticism about the bit in the range phase, it doesn't have any pictures saying line of sight or arcs. But considering what it shows in the movement stuff, that does help a lot. But it would have been nice if they had a picture or two for very clear examples. Melee phase, there's not really any pictures, but that's kind of shown pretty specifically in the movement, so having any pictures for examples here might have been useful, but it's very clearly explained for charges and whatnot, so not really much point. Then it goes on to nerve, how to test nerve, what happens if you beat it, because you have to roll your opponent's nerve. It's a leadership test for people who play Warhammer 40k, that sort of thing. Steady, raving, routed, that sort of thing. Goes then on to war engines. Should be on the 50mm base apparently. I think I've got mine on the 40mm. I hope people are alright with that. I'll have to check. Might be 50mm actually. I'll have to see. No, I think it's 50mm. Anyway, yeah, it just goes on to line of sight, and sometimes it shows that some war machines might be on a bigger base just for decorative purposes, but that's fine. Then it goes on to individuals, which has been expanded a little bit. Then it goes on to special rules, which again from second edition has been expanded a fair bit, quite a bit actually. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of special rules. Depending on the army you pick, some of these rules will not apply to you at all. Depending on the opponent you play, again, these rules will not apply to you at all. Some of them will. In fact, some of them will apply to everyone, but some of them will not. And then it goes on to picking a force, army selection. It's mainly done on the regiments, hordes and legions. That's how you unlock other units, mainly troops, heroes, monsters, titans or war engines. And it gives a pictured example of, if you pick this one thing, you get this thing unlocked. Then it goes into army composition, which I didn't know they kept this, because it was in the Clash of Kings 2019 book, where if you have a game of a certain size, you can only take so many war machines, heroes, monsters or titans. Limited units, allies and smaller games, and then themed list, which that's going to be more in the Clash of Kings 3rd edition book, which is coming out December, I am told. Then it goes on to magical artifact, which has had some tinkering. I think a few new magical artifacts are put in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of magical artifacts. The last 2 pages are more for heroes, and it's kind of make the distinction between common, which is for everyone, and heroic, which is just for heroes. And it does say that anyone that's unique can't take them because they are what they are. Then it goes on to magic, which has been expanded a hell of a lot. 1st edition was very naff. It was just basically, here's a blasty spell, there you go. 2nd edition had about 6 or 7 spells, I think. Bane Chant, Surge, Lightning, and Fireball, that sort of thing. It's expanded a hell of a lot more. There's 1, 2, 3. There's 3 pages of spells and 1 page explaining how they work. The first 2 pages of spells is common and garden spells, which I'll explain more when we come on to army selection. And then the last page is unique spells, which you can only take 1 of each spell. So if a character or unit takes this, kind of makes it more unique, more flavourful, I suppose. Next, it goes on to game scenarios. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages about scenarios. First 3 pages is on about how they work. The next 3 pages is the different scenarios. You roll 2 dice, 2 d6s, and then if you want to do it that way, and that's what the scenario is. After that it's time games, and after that it's really well done photos. Some people could argue you just plonk models down, that's it, but it just shows the enormous battles that go off, and just see the clashes of the forces just rush into each other. Some of the pages you see some defending forces, you only see a few models, but you see a whole swathe of offensive forces just charging at them. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 pages. Some of them are double page spread. Some of them are single pages, but they do look really nice regardless. Then we're on to the background. The first page says Panathor. It's 2-page spread of different parts of the map, because it's fairly big. Starts with the beginning and Panathor and the various descriptions on the different races, little bits here and there, and then it's got a yellow and grey. It's very clean looking map of historic Panathor. Sertica 2487 PA. I'm assuming there's no one called Magnum PA. Yes. Then it goes on to more of the background. There's a hell of a lot. Including a picture which I think have been taken from Vanguard, but it's a very nice picture of an elven library, which, yeah. And then goes into the God War, which was from first edition, but it's been expanded a hell of a lot. And then it's got a really nice picture which I will put up now. And as you can see, I'm assuming I haven't gone much into the background yet, but from what I can tell, it's some sort of wicked one against the shining one, and with the shining one's blade raised high against the wicked one's flaming axe. It's brilliant. I can't say any more. And then it kind of goes Time of Ice, which kind of hints more into Northern Lights. Talks about Valandor a fair bit, which I'm not too bothered about, because in Dungeon Saga, if you're using custom characters, he's pretty naff. But that's by the by for another time. Then goes into Flooding of the Abyss, which was of the Kings of War 2nd edition campaign. They did a campaign book. And then it goes into the map of Northern Panathor, which is kind of more modern, I suppose you could say. It goes into 2 pages of magic with the different laws of magic. One, if you've been watching the League of Infamy Kickstarter, Gastromancy, it is here. And then it goes into the background of the different forces, starting with Basilia. Starting with the good forces, then Basilia. Basilica, or Basilia. Basilia are still good, but I'm sorry to keep harping back to Games Workshop, but Basilia is basically Space Marines. Their way is right, because they know the gods. They will ally with you just because they have to. Otherwise, if you don't believe it, you are wrong. It's more if inside Basilia, the people high up, the lords and the high paladins and whatnot, they don't necessarily keep the people too poor, but they hold an iron grip, and you have to believe that what the Shining Ones say is what's right, essentially. I like the Basilians because you've got huge, probably about 8-10 foot tall angels with flaming swords. Say no more than that. Sold. And then it's got a map of hegemony of Basilia, mainly where they are, and then a map of of 2 of the big cities. That was shown in the Vanguard book, but it looks like it's been exploded and a bit more shown. I like it a bit better because it's not quite so squidged up. Then it goes on to the dwarves. The dwarves have had a bit of a change as of late. They are still good. They're still on the forces of good. However, the Big High King seems to have a chip on his shoulder about anyone that's not a dwarf. And I don't mean just any old dwarf. I mean anyone that's not a dwarf. So we're talking anyone that's a Bristol dwarf, you're with them. Humans, elves, everyone else, you're with them. Allies, not really. And what he basically does from each of the other holds, from each of the other dwarf lords, he wants a tithe of money. Basically, he's taxing people for a dwarven military, which, yeah. So next is a map of the dwarf dwarf cities, well, mountains, as it were. So then it goes on to the more background of the dwarves and the great pastime of smoking, no less. And then it's got a example of a dwarf hold, which very nice, very nice. It goes on to the different workplaces, I suppose. I'm not sure what you call it. You've got Warsmiths, then the Order of Stonesmiths, and then you've got a 2-page spread of that inside back cover, which elves versus dwarves. I mean, that's a trope that's not been used for quite a while, let's face it. And then you've got other background of berserkers and dwarven origins. There's quite a few pages of that. And then we've got a story of the delirium of betrayal. And then we've got a war, the loss of the Halipine Mountains, and story for that. And then we've got the elves with a picture taken from League of Infamy, which seems to suggest next year, I would believe, they are going to have a bit of a redo of the elves. Maybe not redo everything, but a fair bit of it they are going to redo, which is going to be interesting. Goes into a bit background, then Elven Home, which is an elf place. Goes on to about elf spears, strangely enough. And then a map of Elven Home, or Elven Home. And then a different place, Thirina Adair and Elven Archery. And then another beautiful double page, which is the best picture. I mean, there's just so much you can read into that. It's absolutely amazing. One of the best things, one of the best pieces of art I've ever seen, and that might say a lot about my ignorance, but so be it. It is brilliant. Goes on to then the different elven kinds, I suppose. The Sea Kindred, the Twilight Glade, the Northern Kindreds. Some letters written by Mage Tutor Kalnar. And then the Dragon Kindred. The Southern Kindred, the Eastern Kindred. Goes on. And then another double picture of an elf chariot. And a bit more background. And then it goes into the Northern Alliance. First going into the Ice Kin. Into Chill, which is the main big city of the Northern Alliance. Goes more into background of its growing power, which, yeah. And then another double page. And then it goes into the neutral forces, starting with the forces of nature. Fair bit of background. And then a bit about the druids. A bit about one of the places, Galathea, I think it is. And then a story. Not really that much about the forces of nature. I thought there'd be a bit more, but never mind. Then we'll go into the ogres. Bit background. Then the Thing, and it's called the Thing, which is kind of like a social gathering sort of thing. And there's a picture of the Thing. And yeah, it's just basically a huge ogre get together where they drink a lot, watch people fight, and you know, it's not the typical thing you think of when you think of ogres. They're more nomadic, not big muscly people with no brain cells. Ogre mercenaries, which, you know, everyone knows how ogre mercenaries are. Ogre armies. Money, and then one of the characters, Grockamok, and the Granite Fist, and then a picture from one of the King's War 2nd edition books, Ogres and Red Dwarves, Red Goblins, not Red Dwarves, versus Undead. Then the Trident Wells of Nerdica, a bit of background, and then the Nerdican people, and then a bit of background on the Naiads, and then a bit of background on the Pachyderms, and then on the Thor, the River Guard, and then the Trident Kings, and then a nice double picture of the Trident Realms versus the Empire of Dust. And then goes into the different kingdoms of the Trident Realms, then goes into the kingdoms of men. Men at War, the nature of men, the map of the kingdom of men, the spread of men, the different cities, bit of background on that. Then goes into the forces of evil, starting with the Abyssal Dwarves, background on that. Tragar, which is a place, Abyssal Dwarf army. Half-breeds goes into that a bit, which is basically stick two creatures together, a bit of dwarf on top of that, half-breed. Birth of Gnor, which is a place where Berserk the Grim, overmaster of the gift peers of Zark, lives. Legion March, and the map of where the Abyssal Dwarfs are. Then the Empire of Dust, some background of that. Background on the rise of Ophidia, which ties in to the Night Stalkers, because it was his trick that brought them to life, essentially. Read the background to gain more. And then some background and the map of Ophidia. The Ammonites return. And doesn't really go into more than that. Then it goes into the Forces of the Abyss. A bit background. Then the 7 circles goes into details of the different circles. Kind of Dante's Inferno in a way. The Sutherland Rift, a bit about that. Another story called Descent. And 2 Overlords of the Abyss, Baal, and Dranok the Destroyer. And then something called Call to War, the Abyssal Crusade, and the Abyssal Incursions. And then picture. And then it goes on to Goblins. Bit about history on Goblins, Goblin clans, history on someone, the Goblin who would be king, Goblin magic, Goblins at War. Nice picture. And then it goes into the Night Stalkers. A Tearing of the Veil, which the elves have something to do with. Cosmic Horrors, Host of Shadows, Battle of Takarisko, the Lurking Menace, yep. Then it goes into the Orcs. Bit background on there. Then Orc Physiology, Orc Tribe, the God Speakers, which are basically the magic users, priests, that sort of thing. Armies of Orcs. War against the Abyssal Dwarves. Yes, the Abyssal Dwarves, well, the Orcs do not like the Abyssal Dwarves because basically the slave Orcs and normal Orcs do not like that. Orcs are tough, they are hard, they are ready to punch you in the face. The slave Orc is not an Orc. Dreams of Conquest. Then it goes into the Undead. Fair bit of background there. Ophidia, Land of the Dead. Mark of the Vampire goes into a fair bit of vampires. Eat of the Dead, ghouls and the like. Morgoth the Faceless, one of the key players of the Undead. March of the Dead, a bit of background there. Curse Unending. And that's pretty much it for the background. Starting with the Basileia, it still goes into a bit of background, but more into the different units sort of thing. So we've got background on King Men-at-Arms, a bit of background on the Paladin chapters, the Sisterhood Convents, Agents of the Hegemon, you've got Warriors of the Gods, which Elohi, and then it's got 3 characters: Danor the Wizard, Gaius and Julius and Sacramentus. I can't pronounce for all hell. And then he goes into the Basilian army, and then a double page of the different units, photos. That's pretty much what every army is like in this book. Some of the background before each army list is just a bit more background, a bit more flavour. But a lot of it is going over the different unit types, giving you a bit of background, how they are, how they work, giving you ideas of how you could model them, or what models did you get to represent them. And so, yeah. And then it finishes on a photo with some houses, the Northern Lights against the undead. It's pretty damn good. If you can get hold of it, I'm fairly sure Mantic's got a fair few copies left. Do buy it. It might seem a bit expensive, but for the lore and art alone, it is worth it. It is a fantastic book. The only real negatives I can see is some of the units from the army lists are gone. More units that didn't have models, or maybe aren't going to have models, or something like that. For instance, the penitent mobs are gone from the Basilian list. However, you could use the Sisterhood army entry for them, because they pretty much work the same, only with a bit better stats, which is what I'm going to do. A lot of the unique characters are gone. I can understand why, because trying to balance them all in the amount of time they probably had, it just wouldn't be worth it. I'd imagine they're going to do a book in the future where they've got a lot of characters in it, or maybe just characters perhaps, but I don't know, we'll see. Yeah, so this has just been a quick review of, well, it's been over 30 minutes, a review of the King's War 3rd edition big book. I will be going into the armies, but for now, goodbye.